Hello everyone, this is Shannon Flummerfelt from Flip Schools. Welcome to the Understanding Instruction series. This short video is designed for building administrators, and it's just going to remind you of how to examine mission in order to understand instruction. So let's begin first of all with the definition of mission. As building administrators, you're very familiar, I'm sure, with your district's mission statement. You may even have a building mission statement for your school or even for your department. Many times educators will even have personal, professional mission statements. So why do we go through all the trouble of crafting a mission statement? In many cases, the mission statement is not being used to the potential that it could be. And let me explain to you why. I'm going to define mission in a way that really forces mission to be the guidepost for instruction. And if we define mission as a statement of organizational purpose that frames value and helps us to understand whether or not value-added action, intention, planning, decision-making are taking place. So there are a lot of things that you can do throughout the day as the instructional leader in your building. But if you begin to ask yourself and think about, if I spend my time observing a classroom or planning the professional development session for my school, or dealing with a parent who's upset about a teacher in my building, you know, when I engage in those activities and I'm planning for them, I'm making decisions and taking actions, do those things that I do, the planning, decision making, and actions that I take, are they actually adding to the mission statement? So, you know, it's important to understand what your mission statement says. Two examples of typical missions are here. If we were to say the mission of your district is to help all students to become lifelong learners, then as you walk through the day, you're going to begin to ask whether or not what you're performing or what you're thinking about or what you're doing as an instructional leader actually adds to students becoming lifelong learners. Another example of a mission statement, fairly typical, you see this in a lot of districts and schools around the world, is for the district or the school to help your students to develop skills for the 21st century. So again, as an instructional leader and you're making decisions, you are forming intention, you're planning, you're taking action. You want to weigh those instructional decisions against the mission. Does this really foster the development of 21st century skills, for instance? So examining your mission to understand instruction seems like a very, very basic thing to do, but it's actually a very powerful and simple thing to do, and it's something that you can do on the fly. I mean, you carry your mission hopefully in your head and hopefully in your heart, and hopefully it's expressed in your, in your hands. But if it's not, and even if it is, it's important to question that, whether or not what's happening is actually a value add to mission. If you find that repeatedly over and over again, you're not getting the connection between planning, decision making, and action and mission, then either something's wrong with the mission or something's wrong with the planning, decision making, and action. And that's fine to understand that. That's where you can begin to drive a point of improvement. It's important to understand this in the context of flipping a school, because your instructional leadership is going to be really important as to whether or not the flip becomes purposeful and related to mission, or if it's just sort of a glittery thing that we do technologically. And so as you think about flipping, you want to be able to understand, what does the mission say? What am I trying to accomplish here as the educational leader? And what does that mean? So for instance, you might begin to consider at a point in time, let me actually look at what are the deliverables of the instruction that happens in my building that is, that shows that lifelong learners are being produced, that we're developing that lifelong learning passion and competency and application for students. And, as you take a look at that and then, examine what you can do in flipping your school, you can really begin to create a huge value add to your mission statement. What is it that lifelong learners do? What does it look like when a student comes out of a classroom in the math department or out of, grade 7? What do they look like as a lifelong learner? If you're not seeing that, then you're going to want to take a look at what's happening there. And you can actually use mission then to understand instruction. Some other essential questions, and again, these are questions that are promoted by Wiggins and McTighe to try to get down to, what is of core importance here instructionally. And so they ask about deliverables. You can take a look at how lifelong learning outcomes are assessed. If I'm trying to get to lifelong learning outcomes as a deliverable, then how do we assess this in my building? What is it that happens in a social studies class or in a foreign language class or in a physical education class that demonstrates that we're recognizing if some lifelong learning outcomes are occurring? How are we assessing those? Are we just kind of going by, good job, nice work, way to work on a team? Or do we really have some rigor behind that assessment? And then what does instruction look like that fosters lifelong learning? So the deliverables, the assessment, and then what actually should instruction look like in my building if I'm trying to foster lifelong learning? So when you get into the flipping mode as an instructional leader and you start to flip your school, these questions are all of paramount interest because flipping, if you do flipping, it should drive value and add value to your mission. And, if your mission, whatever it happens to say, you should be able to discover that flipping is adding value. If it's not, then either you need to change the flip or you need to change the mission. But to flip just to flip doesn't make any sense. Again, here's the other mission statement we looked at, the one about helping all students to develop skills for the 21st century. So again, mission can be really helpful in understanding instruction. Again, you can look at the deliverables, the assessment, and the actual instructional process. And what does that look like? If you're trying to foster the development of 21st century skills, then, you should be able to say some things and have some answers to what you're observing here happening in your school, what you're fostering as an instructional leader, and what your faculty are excited about engaging in. And mostly that your students can actually come up to you and say, you know what? I did develop 21st century skills by being a student in this school. Thank you for your educational leadership. When you get to that point, then you know you've really nailed it. So again, these are just 3 core questions promoted by Wiggins and McTighe in terms of trying to create an understanding by design approach to instruction. And all I've done here is actually connected those to mission for you to be able to understand that you don't have to have a mission statement that's meaningless. In fact, there's a lot of power in your mission, and if you look to it and use it wisely as an instructional leader, it can be a wonderful tool for you to be able to really attain the value that's possible there in the instructional processes. I hope this has helped you to understand a little bit how to frame up your thinking as an educational leader as you move into flipping your school.